Several of you mentioned, important work, climate journalism overseas, and I wonder if you could talk more about that and the fact that most of our audience is probably U.S. readers, um, but most of the impacts, the most severe impacts, are in the global South and in developing countries. How do we bridge? How do we bridge that divide? How do we get our readers focused on impacts that will be most severe far away?
We've supported again the Post and Courier in South Carolina to do stories that are about changes in climate in other parts of the world and how they kind of relate back to their audience in South Carolina. So Tony Bartlemay, the reporter there, he used 2 different grants from us. He went to Greenland and kind of looked at scientists who were exploring the Greenland ice and the melting there, and why that melting of that ice was impacting South Carolina more than other parts of the East Coast. And it was a really great story with an Elvis impersonator and dedicated scientists kind of exploring the ice in Greenland and connecting back with audiences who are being directly impacted by the changes. And he also used our support to go to West Africa to look at why Sahara dust impacts the way hurricanes are developed. And in that story, he partnered with a local journalist, and going to what others here have said, the collaboration is key. He partnered with the local journalist, and then they did a story about a local West African scientist who's working with American scientists to really try to understand these dust patterns and why they impact our weather and hurricanes so strongly. And it just was a really nice story that kind of bridged cultural divides, bridged scientific divides, and kind of really help audiences understand our connection to other parts of the world. So that's just one example.
Great.
I also don't think it has to be all or nothing. Like, I don't think, yes, I think it's important to go or to do stories that actually show directly how things impact a place. But I went to Iceland and I did a story about how Iceland's fisheries were being impacted by climate change. But in that piece, I noted that in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, because the fish are moving poleward, that is causing migration. So it doesn't have to just be I'm going to this place and I'm going to tell you the intricacies of how it's impacting this area of the global South. It can be the other side too, which is that it should just sort of be inserted naturally as a part of your everyday reporting, and you should recognize the impacts of places other than the places that you call home.
Yeah, I agree with Kendra there. I think you want to find a balance. I mean, you want to, in any story about anywhere, you want to try to make it relatable to as many people as possible, but not to the point where you feel like you're wedging stuff in. If you're doing a story about Bangladesh, it can be a story about Bangladesh, and those people and the issues there. And if it makes sense to try to relate some piece of what you have to, the US or somewhere else, then okay. But if not, just don't force it. We also find, you said, Zachary, that, our readers are in the US. For AP, that's really changing. I don't have, all the numbers in front of me, but our audience is, of course, is in the US, but also a lot of our customers and readers are overseas, and in different places, and we publish in different languages. So we really are trying to tell stories as broadly as possible for as many people as possible, and not just focused on the US.
It's really, it's part of our obligation as journalists to bring what's happening in the rest of the world to people, across the United States and elsewhere. We do have kind of an extraordinary privilege that we are able to travel to these places. And one of the things that I do find kind of encouraging is that there are stories that I honestly worry aren't going to resonate with people, and then you publish them and they do well. Our colleague Chico Harlan traveled to South Sudan and has a piece that published this morning on, what's happened with year after year of flooding, and the fact of what that's meant for hunger there, and how even despite the world trying to help South Sudan, people are taking extraordinary risks to basically get these water lilies that they grind up and eat. And that story seems to be resonating today. And so that makes me feel like we can do that. And you also can help inform people, again, across the world, can read about these things and get an insight on what's happening on something that is truly global. There's no way to cover it unless you're really taking all of that and surfacing it as much as you can.